And welcome back to the Justin Thurber Show. As always, my co-host extraordinaire. Oh my gosh, I can never get this right. Jim Davids. How are we doing today, Jim?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Good, good. Hey, so on this episode today, we're going to discuss why more people are leaving Massachusetts than coming to live here. We're going to talk about how a governor is calling a fake state of emergency because he is not too happy with what state legislators are doing with education in the state. We're also going to take a quick look at another immigration issue affecting our country. And finally, we're going to look at what bills are up for consideration at the State House and if your representatives are really trying to represent you. But first, we're going to have some housekeeping. Jim, you got a couple things for us that are going on this week that you want to discuss?
Yeah. So first off, we have another Mass GOP State Committee caucus. That's going to be this upcoming Tuesday at 6 p.m. in Bedford, Mass. This is going to be good. This is going to be another state committee caucus to fill a vacant seat on the state committee. There's a strong candidate, Doreen Deschler, that's running. She is the RTC chair of the Chelmsford RTC. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. We'll keep an eye on that, see how that goes. I don't know of any other candidates. Typically with these things, they've really had kind of like a grassroots type of candidate and an establishment type of candidate, but I haven't seen anything on that side of things yet. So we'll keep an eye out on that. And then the other big news is State Senator Ann Goby is Democrat, is stepping down to take a role in the Maura Healey administration. And that district was 46% to 54% in 2022. So she won a very close election. Mm-hmm. And there's some Republicans that are eyeing that seat to run. There's going to be a special election. So I think she resigns this coming Friday. She's going to put in her notice. And then once that happens, the Senate will vote on a special election, which I believe has to take place within 90 days. So that puts us at the end of the summer for that election to take place. So stay tuned for that. I think we're going to have some big news on a candidate that's going to jump into that race. Great. And hopefully we can get one of the candidates on the show.
Yeah, that's one of the main purpose on the show is just to get some people visibility and exposure and let people know what they want to do and why they're jumping into the ring for this. So I guess that's good news too. We have a shot. We have a shot to maybe take another Senate seat and start pushing back on what's going on. So, early this week I was looking at the news and I found this video and oh my gosh, you kind of have a feeling this stuff's going on in Massachusetts. Over the last couple of years, I knew a lot of people who have left, and for various reasons. Some is because they weren't happy with their jobs, or their jobs were mandating things that they didn't want to do, or they didn't like the school systems, or they just didn't like the temperature of what's going on, the taxes, the costs, whatever reason. So a lot of people have left. A lot of people have discussed leaving. I think a lot of people around here want to move down south or move to some place where they're more secluded or away from people. I think there's just a lot of people just done with living close to each other. So WBZ had a news report about this subject, so I thought it'd be something that we can discuss, and I found some good statistics we can look at and discuss too. So let me just play that video.
Yeah, a new report just out today by the Mass Taxpayers Foundation says more than 100,000 people moved out between 2020 and 2022. Now, for a couple of weeks, I've been researching tonight's Question Everything, which is, why are people leaving and where are they going? Duck boats and ducklings, the Pops and Pats, leaf peeping and lobster. From Boston to the Berkshires, Massachusetts is great. Rebecca Connell thinks so. The married mother of two from Virginia thought she might be a lifer, but...
So you and your husband have made a big decision.
We're leaving Boston after 12 years.
And what is that like for you?
It's bittersweet, I would have to say. I love this city.
Her family also loves the outdoors, so they're building a home in Vermont. Lots of land and a mortgage that's not a lot more than their rent in Roxbury.
Why do you think more people are leaving than coming in?
Massachusetts is expensive.
United Van Lines has been tracking migration patterns for 45 years. The moving company's most recent study ranked Massachusetts 7th on the top 10 list of most moved from states. 4 of the top 10 are in the Northeast. Eileen Cummings told me more about her company's study.
A lot of northeastern traffic. We see a lot of migration, not only to Florida, but also to states like North Carolina and South Carolina.
Massachusetts has a 56% outbound rate. That means for every 100 people that come and go, 56 are leaving, 44 coming in. The company also surveys customers about why they're grabbing the moving boxes.
When it comes to these statistics, thank you, there is a whole lot to unpack. 36% said that they wanted to move closer to family. 26% mentioned a new job. 22% mentioned retirement, while 18% said they were looking for a better lifestyle. Interestingly enough, only 11% mentioned cost of living. Of course, it could be an undercurrent for all of these categories.
We're seeing a lot of migration to cities that have all the amenities of larger cities, but an easier pace of life.
And the pandemic was a factor. People were working from home, and many didn't stop. No office, no reason to live close by. Rebecca is fully remote. She'll change her address, but keep her job.
I'm in the IT cybersecurity space, and I will.
You can work anywhere.
Yep.
And it wasn't the case before the pandemic.
No.
Which is kind of a sad thing.
Yes.
They love the state, and yet they need to move because it's a lot cheaper and because they want a better lifestyle. It's interesting. The 4 places where people are moving to, 4 of the top 10 are the least densely populated areas in the country. So people want to find space, and they can do it for a lot less.
So there's a lot to unpack in that, a lot to unpack. So if people missed some of that, because it was kind of a long video clip, for every 100 people that move, Massachusetts loses 56. Right? So there's 56 that move out and 44 that come in. So we should be losing people. And the statistics, I went and looked at the statistics from United Van Lines. And if you're watching on YouTube, I have them up on the screen. If you're listening on the podcast, I'll read some of these because it's actually pretty astounding. Some of these things. A lot of them say they're moving outbound for family. Now that one, I was talking with some people, and I don't think it's family like, oh, I have family that lives down south. I think it's like, I don't want my family growing up in this environment in Massachusetts, because that's been my lived experience here. Is there's a lot of people that just so fed up and done with what's going on in this state. They're like, I'm out. I'm not gonna raise my kids here. I'm not gonna grow old here. I'm just getting out.
Yeah, and as you know, and many people know, during the summer of 2020, I actually started a moving company myself during that period. And the very first move that I did is I moved a guy out of Worcester, Massachusetts, and moved him into Winter Haven, Florida. So I drove the truck down there myself, and I got to see it firsthand of people moving out. And I think a lot of this started, like they said, in the pandemic, where you had a lot of the blue states had draconian lockdown measures and stayed locked down, where you had other states that were opening up and it seems like forever ago now, but it wasn't that long ago where you couldn't get a meal. You couldn't go out to eat in Massachusetts because all the restaurants were closed down. Yeah. Meanwhile, you had other states that were completely wide open. So you saw a lot of that migration start then.
It's funny because you say that, right? And I went and looked. Well, a little bit later on, I'll show you the statistics because I thought the same thing. I thought what you would see is the last couple of years there's really been a driving force, and then the percentages would be a lot higher. However, I looked back to 2015, and there's been a net outflow of residents out of Massachusetts since then. Obviously, the last couple of years are a couple percentage points higher. But I think probably because pandemic-related situations, or as this woman said, hey, now her job has changed, so they don't have to live here anymore. They can move somewhere else. And this is a problem because in the next slide I'm going to show, we're going to see the average age of people that are leaving. So again, last week we discussed immigration and how immigrants are coming here and they're the workforce age, and they could be helping out in their countries. It's kind of similar with this. The majority of people leaving are between 35 and 65. And this is like your prime years. This is when you're making most of your money. When you're 18 to 34, you're either going to college, working minimum wage jobs, getting a skill. You're not making top dollar. And the next slide that we have is how much these people make. So 22% make between $100 and $150,000 that are leaving. 46% make 150,000 or more. So we are talking about is 68% of the people make six figures plus, and they're moving. And they're moving because they're saying it's unaffordable. They're moving because they're saying, I don't want my family to be here. They're moving because, pandemic related things. Now they can get on their laptop and work from anywhere. And like, I just don't want to deal with this. And here's the problem is if politicians don't start recognizing this, because I think right now we're going to talk about this later. Like I said, what bills are up at the state house. If we don't start planning better, a lot more people are going to leave because our politicians, our representatives are planning just to tax and tax and tax more because they say, hey, listen, we've taxed a lot already and nothing's really bad's happened yet. But I think what's happening, this is the slow undercurrent. These are the little things that are starting to happen. And my fear is as the tax burden gets higher, as the cost goes up, as the regulations become more burdensome to businesses, you're going to see this accelerate. And then what's going to happen is you're going to be left with a bunch of people here who can't afford to leave and are going to be left holding the bag. Because one of the things that we saw this in New York too, like you said, when the pandemic and you had your company, and I'm sure you saw this too, the people that have the money can move. They can leave whenever they want. If you have money, you can just say, you know what, I'm done, I'm moving. It's the low income people, it's the elderly, it's the fixed income people that get hurt the most by this.
Yeah, and even like throughout the implications from the planning perspective, like think about it just from a personal relationship standpoint. There's, it's one thing if you have someone moving out of the state for good reasons, they got a new job opportunity, maybe they're retired, they're going to some place with a warmer climate. But I think what we've noticed is that a lot of the reasons that people are leaving are not necessarily for good reasons. It's either like taxes are going up, or it's because the culture here has changed and it's not favorable. I mean, I can't count how many people that are more of the conservative minded have just gotten fed up with what's going on in Massachusetts and have decided to leave. Yep. So essentially what's happening is like you have people leaving for kind of like not the right reasons. And it's like, yes, from a state perspective, we want those people, like those are our neighbors. We want those people to stay here and live here and thrive here. Like we want them to grow their families here, but they're, and they want to too, but then they're saying, hey, like this isn't a small decision that they're making. They're packing up their entire livelihood. You think about it, like you put all your personal household items into a truck, you're pretty much getting rid of all your personal relationships in one state, and you have to start from scratch in a completely new area. It's like, this is a huge decision that people are making. Yep. And they're making it because they're saying life has become pretty much unsalvageable here in Massachusetts. So we're going to go and start in a brand new world.
And I appreciate the people, like we always talk about people doing something. And if you're going to stay here, like be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So we hope people that stay here and they say, hey, listen, I love Massachusetts. There's some things that need to be fixed. We can fix them. Let's fix them. Let's hold these decision makers and policy makers accountable, because a lot of these problems are born out of politicians or just bad planning. There's just a lot of bad things that go on, and that the people that make the decisions never have to pay the price for their bad decisions, and everyone else has to pay the price. So one last thing too, I have this slide up. And I found the years from that United Van Lines. You can go to their website. I'll leave links on the YouTube video if people want to go on the YouTube video, or if you're on the podcast, you can look at United Van Lines, and they have all these statistics. I went back far as 2015 because before that it was kind of hard to find information on them. But there has been a net outbound, like I said, like 2015, 57% outbound. 2016, 54%, 2017, 56%, 2018, 55%, 2019, 55%, 2020, 56%, 2021, 57%, 2022, 56% outbound. So that means we're losing more people than we're gaining. And you know, one thing I was thinking about is sometimes businesses are in business because there's a need for them to do the job, not because they're good at business. And I think that also could be said of politicians in some states. I think Massachusetts is very lucky because we have a couple of things. We're close to the water. We have businesses that have been long-standing. We have seafood, import, export, and we have good colleges that just happen to, when Harvard opened or some of these other colleges opened 100 years ago or however long they opened, right? That attracted a bunch of people here. What happens is if we keep making it more and more unbearable, some of these things are just going to leave or go away or people won't come. So these politicians that make these policies and say, "Hey, they're effective and everything works and we're great people." No, no, your policies stink. The only, I guess, benefit for these people is because of things that were there before, they're able to get away with their bad decisions. Kind of like I said earlier, sometimes there's businesses that really stink at the business they do, but the problem is for people is it's the only business in town, so they have to go. So I hope what happens is we start looking at this stuff and you know, again, it's always holding your representatives accountable, holding your politicians accountable, and asking and wanting and making them do better.
The interview in that news segment where with that lady is like point in case too, because with remote work becoming more like widely spread throughout the country, you're seeing a lot more opportunities. Like Boston was originally the first Silicon Valley, really. Like you had most
Yes.
of the internet startup companies were in the Massachusetts area, and then with the non-competes and everything else, a lot of people said doing business is not that great here. So then everyone moved to, you know, California of all places. It's kind of hard
Hmm.
to believe that now that they're more today that they're more business friendly, but back then they were with non-competes and everything. And you know, now with remote work spreading, I think a lot of people and a lot of companies are saying, hey, we don't necessarily need to be beholden to Massachusetts or Silicon Valley anymore. Now we can really go anywhere, and it's crazy because now you hear like Miami is becoming, they call it, Miami is the new Silicon Valley, and then you see all these other states like Alabama that you would think is like, you know, the least technology inclined state out there, but then they're starting to build like a tech sector. Obviously, you have Austin, Texas is a big
Sure.
tech sector. They're a new hot place for technology companies. So this shift has really you know, removed the need to have people in those areas where you can really be all over the country now. And you can, the funny thing is you can see it in truck prices. So
Yes.
if you tried to rent a U-Haul from from Massachusetts going down to Florida, you're going to pay about $2,000 for that U-Haul in total. If you try to rent that same U-Haul from Florida all the way up to Massachusetts, it's going to be about $300
Yep.
because there's such a high demand for them to bring trucks back up to Massachusetts because there's so many people, you know, from the Northeast, whether it's New York or Massachusetts, going down south, and there is the other way that it's all reflected in the truck prices, which is pretty funny.
Very well said. And again, I think what happens is you and I always, we're here, we're active politically. We want to make things better for everybody. And I think what's happened, this is the canary in the coal mine. And I don't care who does. I really don't care. I don't care if it's a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or a mix of everything. But we need to get better. We need to do better. And we need to recognize, read the tea leaves, like all these sayings. We just need to do a better job and figure out ways, because as you said, it's easy now for a lot of these companies to be remote. People not even have to be in the state to do business, and it's the big money business that can leave. It's the tech sector. They can leave now. Everything's easy for them. So we really have to be on our game and really have to make this a welcoming state. So talking about welcoming state, let's get to the next segment, which is North Carolina's governor, who decided that he didn't like that the legislature was starting to make some rules that he didn't like about education. So what he declared is he declared a state of emergency for education. And it's not really a state of emergency, but he had to come out and call it a state of emergency just to play some game. And it's funny. I read an article, and we discussed it on last week's show about Neil Gorsuch and saying how, politicians use the emergencies to take people's rights away, and that's not a thing we should be doing. And the article actually referenced what Gorsuch said and what this guy's doing, because I am sure if this governor had the ability to issue an emergency executive order, he would do it. He would say, I'm going to do a state of emergency for education because I believe my opponents on the other side are doing things that I don't like. So let's watch the video. We could talk about this. I kid you not, probably for an hour. All the word salad this guy says, everything he brings up. I might stop the video a couple times just to really hone in on a couple things that he said and how they twist. And we all know politicians do this, but how they twist things, and then if you listen to one thing and wait a couple seconds and then they say something that contradicts, it's horrible. So here we go.
Hi, everybody. It's time to declare a state of emergency for public education in North Carolina. There's no executive order like with a hurricane or the pandemic, but it's no less important. It's clear that the Republican legislature is aiming to choke the life out of public education. I'm declaring this state of emergency.
Again, the cojones of this guy, a state of emergency. There's no executive order, but a state of emergency. This is a scary thing for me, too. I don't think a lot of people get is if politicians start doing this, right? It starts off with this, like, hey, it's a state of emergency. I really can't do nothing, but it's a state of emergency. And you give credibility to these type of things. Slowly, it turns into they will have the ability to actually make this a state of emergency. This governor should be shamed. He should be laughed at. He should be called out and said, how dare you take something like a state of emergency? We'll look at the definition. I have that in a slide later. How dare you take something that's actually used when there is an emergency, and just because you're not getting your way with education, because the people voted and the people actually want what's going on in the legislature to happen, that you have to sit there and get up and look all professional and invoke this state. It's mind-blowing, and something we have to stop, because like I said, if we keep allowing them to do this, they're just going to take the next little step until this thing is something that they're going to have a power to do that they never had the power to do before. So
If you care about public schools in North Carolina, it's time to take immediate action and tell them to stop the damage that will set back our schools for a generation. Here's what's happening in the next few weeks. Their private school voucher scheme will pour your tax money into private schools that are unaccountable to the public and can decide which students they want to keep out.
So again, is he kind of right? Your tax dollars will be poured into private schools. Okay. But if you're a parent of a student, isn't that your tax dollars? Right, Jen? It just blows my mind. It's like, hey, your tax dollars are going to go pay for this family's kid to get a better education. And I'm sure that family who would otherwise say, hey, listen, this is a failing school, I can send my kid to a better school. And because the state takes a bunch of my money, now they're giving some back that I can use to send my kid to school and get a better education, which helps the state out. But I think the real issue here is, I think politicians like public schools because they can manipulate what you're learning. And I think it happens on both sides, right? Because Democrats will say, look at Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. And Republicans will say, look what's happening in these other schools with all this woke stuff and this, what's it, DEI and, critical race theory in schools. So I think both parties try doing that. And I think a lot of parents are sick of it, and they're just like, listen, let me make the decision. I shouldn't have to feel trapped because I moved to a town where the school system doesn't line up with my values, or I just want my kids to learn math, English, science, and be left alone with everything else.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So the dollars follow the student. So if each student is getting whatever, $10,000 per student, and you have all the kids in the public school system, and then all of a sudden parents are making their own decisions. Hey, I want my kid in the private school system. Then guess what? Those funds are going to move with the students. So this public schools are going to get less. So he's calling it out like this is some like nefarious scheme, but these are parents making decisions that, hey, I want my kids to go to these school systems because I like these school systems better than what's currently being offered. And he's trying to twist it into making it look like it's some like nefarious thing going on, which that's not the case.
It's always they're the evil parents who want their kids to get a better education. Ooh, those evil parents. So all right, let's listen a little bit more.
They want to expand private school vouchers so that anyone, even a millionaire.
Ooh, those million. This is what I love. Like even a millionaire, even a person that pays more taxes than you, they're gonna get help. Well, they pay taxes too. Why wouldn't they? But again, this is that class warfare they want to use. Like, oh, millionaires are getting help. Yes, they pay taxes. Why shouldn't they get the same benefit? Aren't we about equality? Oh, nope, we're not about equality in this situation.
Can get taxpayer money for their children's private academy tuition. When kids leave public schools for private school, the public schools lose hundreds of millions of dollars. And while they hand out private school vouchers to millionaires, they also want to give them large tax breaks too. This drops an atomic bomb on public education by shrinking the state's budget by almost 20%. Public school superintendents are telling me they'll likely have to cut schools to the bone, eliminate early college, AP, and gifted courses, art, music, sports.
So here we go. Doesn't this happen every time? I hate when they do this. I so hate it. Every time there's budget cuts, what do? We're going to cut sports. And when I listen to this, you listen to this, and what's he doing? He's trying to appeal to people like, hey, we're going to cut all these things that you people like. So the answer is to cut the things that help people achieve. Gifted classes, AP classes, higher learning classes. So the only thing that we can teach in schools, the only thing we can teach if we don't have more money is general education level classes. Is that what you're telling me? Is that a reality? Because that's a reality. I'd pull my kid out so quick too.
Yeah, and then the other kind of thing that he hasn't talked about that's a huge influence in the public school system is the teachers union. And we see how much money goes to that and how much we saw in Massachusetts in question 1 last year, how much money the teachers union pours into political decisions. So in like the ballot question 1, for example, and you don't hear him talking about making cuts there. It seemed like that's I would probably cut there before I cut anything else that he's listing, but you don't see him talking about that.
Well, it's funny. I was doing some research and it was kind of close to this. I didn't put it into it, but it talked about what the national debt was in like the 1960s. I think it was like 200 something billion dollars, right? And then fast forward to now, we're like what, 35, 50 trillion, who knows? And people are like, what did we get for all that debt? And here's something I've said to people for a long time is like my mother would show me her yearbook and they had all these programs, all these societies, all these things they could do in school. And school has gotten less and less and less like extracurricular things that kids can do. And it's getting more and more expensive. So what's happened? How did school get more expensive and give you less? I mean, I guess it's kind of like everything now. I'm going to say this now. You used to buy your bag of cookies, and now you buy your bag of cookies, and it has this plastic thing in there where each cookie goes in, and you could probably fit like 3 cookies in that one cookie thing, and the bag's still the same size, so you think you're getting the same amount of cookies, but there's like 12 cookies in the bag for the same price. That's what we're doing. We're kidding people.
Yeah, I think of it like the runaway HOA, so the homeowners association fee. So it's like, it's like you start off paying, $100 a month. Maybe that's just going towards like some shared utilities or whatnot.
Yep.
The next month, all of a sudden you get, there's a new cleaner that's involved that's going to clean up things. You're like, okay, I'll pay an extra $50 for that. The next month after that, you get a new person coming in, and then but before you know it, after a couple of years, your HOA has gone from $100 to $1,000, and you have all these services and things that you're not really benefiting from, but you're paying for. And that's kind of what has gone on with the school system. And you look at most of these towns' budgets, for example.
Yep.
Like in my town, the population has increased by about 10% over the last 10 years, but the budget has gone up by about 70%, and a lot of that has come from the school system.
So wait, yeah, we gotta wait because it gets better. Because you kind of jumping the gun. So let's check it out.
If the legislature keeps draining funds to pay for private schools and those massive tax breaks, we have more than 5,000 teacher vacancies in kindergarten through 12th grade classrooms, leaving tens of thousands of students without a qualified educator. Our students deserve good teachers. That's why instead of tax breaks for rich folks in private schools.
So really quick, think about what he just said. He's like, we're 5,000 teachers short. And I think parents would see this too. Like, hey, listen, some of these schools don't have enough teachers. And there's an actual option. It's private schools that you could go to. So I think this is a good thing. Like parents say, hey, listen, our school doesn't have the appropriate amount of teachers for my child to get a good education. So why shouldn't I be able to get it? And what his argument would be is like, well, the school would lose money. Well, the school has a job to do. The school has to educate. The school has to prepare. The school has to do better. The option shouldn't be, well, just wait for us while your kid suffers. No wonder parents support this overwhelmingly in North Carolina.
Private school vouchers, I proposed a pay raise of 18% over the next 2 years because our teachers deserve better pay and more respect.
So again, I knew you were getting a little bit ahead. He wants to give them an 18% pay raise right off the bat. I would love an 18% pay raise over the next 2 years. I'd love it. When most people love an 18% pay raise, the legislature there wants to give, I think, 9%, 4.5% a year. I think that's what they're saying. And that's too little. That's disrespectful. And then what he's going to do is, again, they always change it. They always, for people that don't know how things work, they always come out with something to confuse you. So he's going to tell you that, hey, listen, some of our highest tenured people are only going to get $250 over the next 2 years. But what he doesn't tell you, and those are top step teachers. So teachers have like a step program where, you have a bottom step, you get paid this. And then, as you work up, you get more and more money. And then there comes a point where you top out. You can't make any more money. But again, there's a little misinformation here. Let's call it that. Because what happens is every time there's a teacher contract renewal, that top step number changes and it gets higher. And then what they do is they not only does it get higher, they raise it every year too. So if you were a teacher that 10 years ago and you looked and you said, hey, listen, at my top step, I'm only going to make, let's say, $50,000. 10 years later, top step is $72,000. So that teacher's been making pay raises, but what he's going to do is he's going to like, oh, some people are going to make $250. Well, they make the most money. There is just a across the board raise for every teacher. So there's nothing like, hey, are you an effective teacher? Are you a good teacher? Are you a better teacher? Like, there's no performance review to justify this. It's just like, well, you made it this long. You stuck it out with these kids, so here's some money. And I'm sure that $250 within another contract or two will be thousands of dollars. So these are the little tricks they play because people don't know how it works. So there's a little bit more to go, so we're just going to get through this quick.
But the legislature wants to give them neither one. In fact, the Senate has given veteran teachers a $250 raise spread over 2 years.
Not veteran.
$250. That's a slap in the face, and it'll make the teacher shortage worse. Tax giveaways to the wealthy also harm our youngest learners. Families and businesses across the state have called for strong investments in early childhood education. But so far, the legislature is turning its back on children, parents, and the businesses that want to hire those parents by shortchanging pre-K, Smart Start, and quality child care. Our strong state economy is built on strong schools at every level. What doesn't work is taking away funding and using partisan politics to fool parents who care deeply about their children's future.
Can't remember. This guy just said partisan politics.
Not satisfied just to starve public education, the Republicans in the legislature also want to bring their political culture wars into the classrooms. If they get their way, our state board of education will be replaced by political hacks who can dictate what is taught and not taught in our public schools.
Is he
North
projecting?
Carolina schools need
Yes.
rigorous science, reading, and math classes.
I would agree with this. I would agree with they need rigorous science, reading, and math. And he's sitting here talking about they want to fight the culture war in school. I think there's a reason why parents and the legislatures are doing this. I think what's happening is there is a culture war going on in school, and the parents don't like it. And they voted this legislator and a lot of these people in saying, you need to fix this. And like I said, there's mass support. We'll see it later. There is mass support in North Carolina for what the legislature is doing. And this guy is like, they're gonna get their way and we won't have our way. Well, that's
Yeah,
what
he-
happens.
He's
Go ahead.
talking about all the things happening in the school system today that people are fed up with, and that's why they're moving them to the private
Yes.
school systems.
Yes.
They're saying, "Oh, if private school systems exist, all these things are going to happen." Well, it's like all these things are happening.
Yes. So, all right, just a little bit left on this, whatever, because then he gets into the crux, I think.
Not more politicians policing our children's curriculum with book bans, elimination of science courses, and more.
There it is. There it is. The elimination of science courses. I don't know which science courses he's talking about, and book bans. And so he just said not to make it political. He said the culture wars, but now he's talking about book bans. Well, what book bans is he talking about? And why do you think parents are rallying behind these legislatures? Again, this guy is a losing argument.
Put together, these ideas spell disaster that requires emergency action.
I also was able to go on to this website, Reason. I found this article, and the really cool thing about it is for people that had listened to or watched our last show, it actually tied into what we talked about last week when Justice Gorsuch warned of officials addicted to emergency decrees. And this article speaks about it. And I just want to read a little bit to you out there because it just parallels what we said. Something we said in the beginning too about politicians who want to take the power and just rule everybody and not have any consequences, right? Is it an emergency when you're losing an argument? North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper thinks it is. He declared a state of emergency for public education because state lawmakers propose what he calls extreme legislation regarding education choice, funding, and curriculum. While Cooper claims no extraordinary powers, his performative declaration underlines warnings by U.S. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, published just days earlier, that government officials have become entirely too accustomed to issuing emergency decrees to bypass normal debate and suppress dissent, and that civil liberties have suffered as a result. And I can't disagree with that statement. Why else would this guy sit here and come out and say, "Hey, listen, I'm ordering this state of emergency. I have no authority to do it, but I'm issuing it," because I think what happens is he wants to set a precedent. You know, executive orders, for most people, I don't know if they know this, executive orders weren't used that much, probably like 20 years ago. And all of a sudden, gridlock was happening in Congress, and now that's how our government runs, through executive orders, and that's not how it's supposed to run. So I have up on the screen for the people watching on YouTube and for the people listening at home, I'll read it. This is what a state of emergency is supposed to happen for. When disasters strike, whether natural or man-made, state and local governments and emergency managers need quick access to resources that allow them to manage a crisis and return things to normal. The declaration of a state of emergency helps elected leaders achieve this mission. All right, a state of emergency helps enable government officials to take extra measures to protect the public, trigger anti-price gouging laws, and seek state or federal funding aid for disaster response if warranted. Some of the things that it's supposed to be used for is to be cleared during a situation or imminent threat of widespread or severe damage, injury, or loss of life or property resulting from natural or man-made cause. This has nothing to do with any of this. And what this politician, this governor, and his people thought, hey, listen, let's call it a state of emergency because that'll rile people up. And then maybe what happens if people accept that we call this a state of emergency and we get some support on our side, we'll then use it as a state of emergency to rule by dictate and then overthrow the rule of the legislatures and the people that want these laws to be passed.
Yeah, like you said, the field goal posts keep moving. So when you have a hurricane, for example, come through, most people are going to be like, okay, state of emergency. I'm not going to, bark too much about that. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we have a health pandemic, whatever. We're going to issue a state of emergency for that. Most people are going to say, okay, we kind of agree with that. Then you go, okay, now we're going to say, oh, there's a climate crisis. We're going to call a state of emergency for that. And then all of a sudden you're going to, oh, there's an education crisis. We're going to call a state of emergency for that. And again, it's like now we're getting to the point where there's no imminent loss of life. And then the field goal posts keep moving and keep moving. So what's going to be, one, there's no imminent loss of life anywhere in here.
Yes.
And, it's like, what's the next emergency going to be? But he is right to call an emergency. I think he's just identifying the wrong victim here. The victim is not the education system. The victim is the government losing control of the school system and losing control of tax dollars and power over all that.
You're way ahead of us today.
Yeah, I think that's the real victim of all this.
So I'll read a little more of this article because this article states it like way better than I could, and it was very well written. So, is it an emergency when opponents disagree? It's time to declare a state of emergency for public education in North Carolina. Cooper, a Democrat, announced May 22nd. There is no executive order like with a hurricane or the pandemic, but it's no less important. We heard him say that. It's clear that the Republican legislator is aiming to choke the life out of public education. Specifically, Cooper objected to the legislature's plan to expand a private school voucher scheme, by which he means the state's opportunity scholarships, currently limited to low-income students. A bill passed by the House and pending in the Senate would expand criteria for participation. So there was a bill to help low-income students get better access to education, and they want to expand that. That seems pretty reasonable. So the Choose Your School, Choose Your Future Act eliminates income eligibility limits for the Opportunity Scholarship Program. Instead, vouchers would be awarded based on a sliding scale with lower income families getting the most money. So remember he told you those dastardly millionaires would get this money. Well, they're not going to get as much. They're still going to have to pay more. So, don't clutch your pearls too much, guy. That doesn't sound like much like of an emergency, but neither do Cooper's disagreements with lawmakers over tax cuts and teacher pay. And while his dispute with Republicans over curriculum decisions on what students learn is yet another serious example of the country's political fracture, it's also one that could be resolved by giving families vouchers to pay for schools that suit their needs and preferences. That is, one element of the governor's so-called emergency would actually be fixed by what seems to be his main emergency concern. Like you and I said, there's that political fracture. Let's not make this political. And the culture wars in the school. And a lot of parents, we don't want to have to deal with this. So just give us our money back so we can get our kids just to be educated because we don't need them to be part of your culture war, part of your indoctrination. The last part of this is good. Then we can talk a little more. So he says, it's worth noting that Cooper declared a state of emergency, not just because he's losing an argument with lawmakers, but also because he's losing an argument with the people of North Carolina. School choice is popular among the public that elected the governor to office. That's it.
I think the millionaire class is becoming like a pariah in society today. Think about it. I mean, let's say you were a millionaire in Massachusetts and then you had the millionaire's tax passed on you. So you moved to North Carolina. Now all of a sudden the governor's coming after you and saying that you're ruining the school system and that we don't want you here. Now all of a sudden, now you're gonna have to find a new state to move to. And it's like you'd think that people in like most millionaires, I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but I think it's like 9 out of 10 millionaires are self-made. They didn't inherit their money, so that means they started a business. A lot of them have just worked regular jobs, but they've saved up their entire lives and they reach retirement age and they've between the equity that they've built in their house and like their savings and 401k and everything like that, they're technically a millionaire. But yeah, it's like, it's like they're an unwanted class. It's just, if I was a state, I would be like, I want you guys to move to our state. And I think that's what you're seeing in this shift, is there are a lot of states saying, hey, we want to treat people that do the right things, versus other states saying that are essentially penalizing you if you're doing the right things.
So this guy's fighting a losing battle too, because I put up on the screen this there was a poll by Morning Consult, and they polled the parents in North Carolina, and the pollsters reported that 61% of all adults and 73% of school parents support school vouchers. We don't really agree that much on a lot of things, so that's pretty good. 69% of adults and 80% of school parents favor education savings accounts, and 68% of all adults and 78% of school parents support charter schools. People want it. I think people on all sides are just done. And the best thing about this right now, if you read I'll read the next part, is Governor Roy Cooper, I guess, had three daughters, and they all graduated from St. Mary's, which is a private school.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
And his wife would serve as a commencement speaker at the school's ceremony in 2017. So here's the thing: we have great schools. We need great public schools. Oh, all my kids, they went to private school.
If they didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all.
All right, so I think like I said, this is something to watch. You're gonna see this. This is going on. These conversations are happening everywhere. In Massachusetts, and I'm pretty happy about this. You see people pulling their kids out of public schools and putting them into private schools. And I even talked to more people that if they had money to do it, they would do it. And I bet you anything that if we had a school voucher program in here where you could get your money to send your kid to a private school, like public schools would suffer. And I don't want to see that happen. Like, I legit don't want to see that happen. I know a lot of good teachers in the public school systems. I think what happens is a lot of the administration, and not just even the administration, probably politicians that set policies for these schools stink, make these schools bad. If they allow these schools to actually teach and actually set high standards, you know what would happen? Is people wouldn't have to look for other schools. They wouldn't be looking for other schools. But what's happening is we're lowering the bar, and we're teaching stuff that parents don't care about. They want their kid to be educated. Kids can't count change. They can't read cursive. There's so much they can't do these days. But there's all this other stuff they want to teach your kids. So I think a lot of parents are just getting sick of it. And hopefully this is what turns it. Hopefully what happens is again, as we said earlier, hopefully politicians and these people that make these decisions smarten up and realize, hey, listen, we had it good for a while. We kind of have to get back to the basics and start doing the right thing, and like I said, this kind of ties into what we talked about last week with Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, of how politicians will use emergencies to gain power. And it's something we have to stop. It's something as citizens, we have to sit there and say, no, like, it has to be legit, and you have to have the consent of the people, and you can't take our liberties, and you can't take what is ours away from us just because, you have this feeling or this belief that something isn't going the way you want it to go. Like you said earlier, it could be, hey, listen, there's a climate emergency, so none of you people can do this. No. Like, that's something that everyone should have to get on board with, not just ruling by fiat. So, and again, talking about politicians not planning for things, thinking everything's going to be rosy. We're going to move on to New York City immigration. And again, last week we discussed what's happening in Taunton and how we got 400 immigrants from Haiti, and how they weren't prepared and how much money's being spent. Now, remember, New York City and New York State both said they were a sanctuary state and sanctuary city. Well, when you say that, but you don't put the plans or the infrastructure in place, you're going to pay, and you're going to pay a lot more. So when we sat here and we said, hey, listen, Taunton's paying $25,000 a person. Well, not Taunton, the state of Massachusetts is paying $25,000 for an immigrant, each immigrant that's here. Wait to see what's happening in New York City. It's going to blow your mind. It's crazy.
The migrant crisis here in the city is reaching a new high. The buses keep arriving, with officials repeatedly saying the city is reaching a breaking point. News 4 government affairs reporter Melissa Russo is live in the newsroom. And Melissa, even a city jail is now being talked about as an option for housing migrants.
It is, Chuck. Rikers Island is now one of the places being floated to house asylum seekers. The mayor says they're looking at hundreds of options. The mayor and his team will not say if Rikers is real. And one question is whether, after months of putting up migrants in midtown hotels, the city might be looking to deter them from coming here. 5 buses arrived today, and it is not.
So for the people who are listening on the podcast, the Chiron, the words at the bottom of the screen that scroll usually, it says nearly 50% of New York City hotel rooms filled by migrants. That's a true statement. That's what got me into this. I saw an article. I'm like, that can't be true. It's true.
Hola, bienvenidos.
It may be a migrant child's first memory of New York City, the literally uplifting moment when they stepped off a bus and received a playful welcome from volunteers on the ground. But many of these migrants remained waiting at Port Authority in the past hour as our sanctuary city scrambles for space to house them.
We got 4,200 people last week came to our city for shelter. I need everybody to wrap their heads around that for a moment.
They could.
I need you to wrap your head around that for a moment. 4,200 people came to a sanctuary city that I called a sanctuary city in a sanctuary state where we said, come on in, we'll take care of you. We're not like all these other states and cities that don't want you. Wrap your mind around that. Right? That's what I like. Does this guy understand what he's saying?
Yeah, remember, it's like what Martha's Vineyard last summer. Remember when everyone started arriving, and it's like Martha's Vineyard has all these signs across the island. All are welcome here. All are welcome here in the sanctuary state of Massachusetts. Once they come here, they're like, we want nothing to do with you. You know, they were in Martha's Vineyard for like less than 24 hours before they shipped them off and sent them somewhere else.
They had the National Guard there to get them out. The National Guard there to get them out. And this is the problem is I will agree sometimes with rich people and some things that happens. That was a bunch of rich people ticked off that they were being affected by this, right? And again, I think this shows the duality of what goes on in our country is because we're going to see in this video, you have people, low-income people being affected by this. And you know what? The government's like, oh, there's nothing really we can do. But if you're a rich community and you get some immigrants and all are welcome, they're welcome for less than 24 hours.
And this is at a time, this was like September of last year. So talking about Martha's Vineyard, you know, with all the Airbnbs, all the vacation housing, all the rentals, this Martha's Vineyard was probably the most housing rich place of any place in the country that you could put people. And even they were like, nope, sorry, you got to go somewhere else.
Well, we'll see a little bit more, and we'll talk about it in this video too. But they're thinking of putting them at Rikers Island in a prison. Great. That's just. Oh my
Could
gosh!
end
Here we
up
go.
sleeping anywhere from a midtown hotel, which Mayor Adams says is unsustainably expensive for taxpayers, to Rikers Island.
Everything is being considered.
Parents and students today protesting the use of school gymnasiums, charging the city should not try to solve one problem by creating another. The city later in the afternoon moved some migrants out of schools.
We support asylum seekers on school grounds.
But not because of the protests, they say.
I'm not reversing strategy. The strategy was to have emergency sites for short-term respite, which always meant that people would move to another site when that became available.
Claiming the city is at a breaking point, Deputy Mayor Ann Williams-Isom called on other cities to pitch in and help.
Yeah, the other sanctuary cities that are going through this, because a couple weeks ago on our show we talked about Chicago and how they're overloaded. We're talking about cities in Massachusetts that are overloaded, and now we're talking about New York, they're overloaded. This is a federal problem, and they're going to get to that. But these people, just a couple of years ago, were sitting there beating their chests. We're nicer people than everyone else because we care about immigrants. It's not that the people that were sitting there saying, hey, listen, we need to figure something out, didn't care about immigrants. They knew this would happen. They knew there was going to be poor planning. There's no place to put them. It's going to be a huge expense. But these people didn't care because you know what? They could use that as political capital and say, you're a bad person because you don't care about people and I care about people. Well, now they're dealing with the effects of their decisions, which weren't good decisions. If they've been thinking about this for years, why weren't they building facilities? Hell, during a pandemic, we built facilities to house people that we might have to quarantine. Where are those? Not only where are those, but if you could build those so quick so you could quarantine people, why can't you build facilities to house people? And not only that, why couldn't you do this before for people that needed help? American citizens, taxpayers, homeless veterans, elderly people that were not eating because they had to pay for their gas. All right, there's a little more.
Help unburden New York. Meanwhile, the public pushback could help Mayor Adams make his case that President Biden should be offering more in the way of federal solutions. The mayor saying today he may or may not decide to use Rikers to shelter migrants, but that negative optics will not be a factor in that decision.
I'm willing to make the tough decisions and not get bottled down in what the optics are. And whomever is telling us not to go somewhere, I have one question from them. You tell me where we should go then.
I will tell you. Call me up. Call me up. I'll tell you. Will you tell him, Jim?
I'll tell him.
Like there's, I got some places I could tell you where they could go.
Yeah.
I got some ideas to tell you what you could do. But you know what the problem is? We're the bad people. We're the bad people that say, hey, listen, maybe we can help these people out in their homeland. We're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. We're sending millions of dollars to Ecuador to teach drag shows. I kid you not. That's a story this week. We have all this money. We're blowing like crazy, but we don't have the desire to look at people that are coming in our country saying, where are these people coming from? What is the problems? And can we offer real solutions to those problems? The problem is our politicians only want a photo and a quick fix. They want to stand there for a photo. I'm a nice person. I did something. Whether it's effective or not, they can say, I did something. And then when it all goes to crap, they're like, who's got a better idea? Who's got a better idea? Everyone that was telling you for years we had better ideas and that your ideas were stupid. That's who.
I saw another news article recently with Michael Burry. He was the guy that was famous for The Big Short in 2008.
Yes.
And his company, they have to release a 13F, which just discloses what sort of companies that they're invested in. And the only company that he was invested in, all his other money was in cash, but the only money that his company was invested was a company called Geo Group, which pretty much specialized in, it was a private company that specializes in dealing with the migrant crisis. So I think he might have been onto something a little bit a few months before all this stuff started happening.
All right, let's get through this really quick. We got a couple slides to show off this video.
Governor Kathy Hochul has asked President Biden to build federal shelters on federal property because she says this is a federal problem that is right now costing New York billions of dollars because of New York's unique dual status as a sanctuary state with a right to shelter.
The governor, hey, this is a federal problem you created because we're a sanctuary state. So you should give us money because we're a sanctuary state. I bet you if you didn't call yourself a sanctuary state, they wouldn't be sending them there. Does that kind of make sense? But these people, oh my gosh, these people have lost the plot. So really quick on the screen, I found a couple of articles. I'll read them a little bit. But Mayor Adams signs a $275 million deal with New York City hotels to house migrants. This is my point. $275 million. You don't think $275 million in Ecuador, in Haiti, would help people out? So the story goes from News Nation, Mayor Eric Adams has agreed to a $275 million contract with the Hotel Association of New York City to house at least 5,000 migrants for the next 6 months. 5,000 migrants. That comes out to $55,000 per migrant. That's crazy. $55,000. You know, it's funny. I was talking to someone about this week, and I said, "Listen, I bet you if you told them, hey, we'll give you $15,000 if you go back home," they'd be like, "Yeah," because 15,000 back in their country, they could probably do some things and make their country better. And that's what we want. We want everyone around the world. We want these migrants to have a better life, but we're doing it the wrong way. We have to be better. We can't just say, hey, listen, we're going to take these people in for this photo and to make ourselves good people for political capital. And then all of a sudden, when it gets real hard, be like, we don't know what to do, and just stop wasting money. It's not just wasting money. I watched a video is they went and they talked to local business owners next to these hotels that usually have travelers. So you have these 5-star hotels that are housing migrants, and we're going to show you some pictures of what the migrants have been doing. And they're like, our business is down because we don't have tourists anymore. So crime's up a little bit, and business is down. And when business is down, guess what happens? You get less tax revenue. So next year they're going to be like, hey, we're hurting for tax revenue too. What happened? Well, what? They're not serious people. They pretend to be serious people. They pretend to know the answers. They don't. And it's evident in everything they do. And we still sit here and we like, oh, this person has the answers. They don't have the answer.
Yeah, it just leaves you as like, you got to think that like our leaders can't be this incompetent. So you have to start like searching for other reasons why they would be doing this. And it's just like there's really no good answers that come with that. I mean, we talked about before with like stuff going on in the banking sector and commercial real estate, and you're like, is this the government's solution to trying to fix all these commercial real estate properties that have lost value because no one's using them? Is this like their fix is to throw migrants in there like as like a band-aid? It just it's hard to believe that our leaders can be this incompetent.
So I found another New York Times article, and it says Mayor Adams criticizes Biden and rare public rebuke over migrant crisis. The mayor blamed the White House for not doing enough to help New York City deal with the influx of migrants or helping them find work. So that's the other thing, helping them find work. And you're like, what do you mean helping them find work? So I guess what's happening is a lot of these people, they want to put to some sort of work, but they don't have work for them. And the article goes on, Mr. Adams, who said it could cost the city as much as $4 billion to feed and house the migrants over the next few years. $4 billion. Here's a problem that's going on. We have pension funds for public employees around the country that might be insolvent or could be insolvent, and they're short billions of dollars, right? This could go to help people's pension funds. This could go to help homeless people. This could go to help the elderly. This could help with heating for people that need it. But no, what we do is we have politicians that just waste money. And here's one other thing I wanted to get to, one other really quick. Officials say that more than 55,000 people seeking asylum have arrived in New York City since the spring of 22. Close to 35,000 are being housed by the city and receiving services. That is crazy. And like you said, 4,200 people just showed up on the bus again. It's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. 5 million, suppose they say 5 million immigrants have come since Biden took office into the country. And what you're starting to see is initially people didn't care, right? They thought it was a Texas issue, it was a border issue, but now it's starting to come home, and now it's starting to affect people. And wait a couple years when people's taxes go crazy, and it affects their pocketbook, and things are really going to change. Because look, you had kids out on the street protesting, like, we're not against asylum seekers, we just want our gym back. It's just a gym. Wait till these kids realize that they're going to be paying for these people for years.
Justin, everything's going to be okay. We're reaching a negotiation. We're reaching a deal with a national debt. So we're just going to increase the national debt. We're going to just like write all this money in. So everything's going to be completely fine. Don't worry about the spending. Don't worry about the extra taxes. We're coming up with a deal in the next week. So everything's going to be fine.
So for the people on the podcast, if they want to go to the Daily Mail, they can search for the Row Hotel. I guess there was a kind of a whistleblower. He worked there, and what he did is he went on a bunch of different shows saying what's going on in those things. I heard a story of I guess their parents will leave their kids there for a week by themselves. There was a drunk 10-year-old girl or 12-year-old girl with a couple of other drunk teenagers because they're not being watched. And then he had pictures. And I'm putting the pictures on the YouTube for people on YouTube to see. There's just alcohol, food, clothes, because obviously it's what people do. Sometimes when you get money or you're in a place like I was in the military, you're going someplace else, you're far away from home or something like that, and you just have a lot of time, a lot of money. What do people do? They drink, they have fun. But I guess it's like riddled with people getting pregnant, fights. It's a free for all. Like the headline says, it's a free for all of drugs, sex, and violence. And then they're also saying because things are getting in disrepair because these people aren't cleaning and the maids can't get in and things are falling apart. And you're taking a 5-star hotel and you're decimating it. So, like I said, you got to look at the pictures. And the problem is, like I said, I'm not blaming these people. Like, just need to do better. And we can do better. But politicians, unfortunately, I'm going to have to keep saying it, they just want the quick fix or the thing that seems to be the quick fix where they can have a photo. And then when things go awry, it's blame someone else. You just heard the governor of New York City say we need help from the president to build on federal facilities because this is his issue. But at the same time, they're proud that they're a sanctuary state and New York City is proud it's a sanctuary city. Well, are you proud?
The thing too is we're not talking about like 10 years ago they were going around saying they were proud to be a sanctuary city and sanctuary state. This was like literally a year ago that they were going around saying it. So all this stuff is pretty recently as last year that they were celebrating all this stuff. And then fast forward to today, completely different story.
I'm going to give some people out there a heads up why. Last year was an election year. This year is an off cycle, so there's no election, so they can complain. And next year they're going to love these people again, and they're going to cover this up. They're going to take your money to cover this up and not tell you about this, that they're doing this because they want to get elected and be the good person and use this as political capital. And I'm sick and tired of people being used as pawns as political capital. So one last thing we'll talk about on from there. And you know, we kind of started talking about like how politicians aren't really always working for you. I started to look through, I'm on Progressive Mass Scorecard, and they're a liberal website that tracks bills that are going to maybe be passed or up for consideration to be passed at the State House in Massachusetts. And I suggest everyone to go on this website really quick. I'll leave a link in the description. If you're listening to a podcast, go to my Facebook page and, you know, we'll probably have a link to the video so you can get these links. But there are some crazy, crazy bills up for consideration. And I think the reason for it is because people don't pay attention. One of the things that we talked about earlier, Jimmy, was they want to enable cities and towns, and this is Bill H 2747. They want cities and towns to be able to assess a fee of 0.5% to 2% on residential and commercial real estate transactions, with the funds allocated to affordable housing trust funds. So what this means to the layperson is if your town wants to participate in this, they're going to potentially charge you an extra 0.5% or 2% when you sell your property. So instead of just paying your broker, your real estate broker, 6% or whatever, now think about it, almost 8% you could be paying to sell your house to fund affordable housing trust, which I'm sure will be used in the most fiduciary responsible way to make sure everything's above board and not to pay a bunch of people hundreds of thousands a year to manage those.
Yeah, and that's even if the housing units are really affordable. In my town, we had a housing project being proposed right in people's backyards, by the way. It's like literally the town will find any land that they can use and say that this should be dedicated. They don't care who lives in the neighborhood. You know, they don't actually care where the affordable housing should go. that's even if these these are actually affordable housing units. So in my town, they've used these funds to promote housing projects in people's backyards, but the units that they've proposed are 80% of, they call it AMI, which is like average median income.
Mhm.
So if the market rate on those homes is 3,500, the AMI is going to be like 2,700 bucks a month, and that's what they're calling an affordable housing unit. So these units are designated as that. But like, do you know anyone in that's needs affordable housing that can afford 2,700 bucks a month? I sure don't.
No. So I'm not going to get into too many of these other ones, but I just want to read through just a couple more. And again, I really just want to hit on this because I think what happens is they operate in almost total darkness. People don't know what they're doing. And I think it's incumbent upon us to educate ourselves and to go figure out what the people that we elect to represent us are actually representing us. And they're not. I mean, let's be honest right now, they're not. Because if you watch how they vote along party lines. So here's one, the Healthy Youth Act. This is Bill H544. Requires school districts that provide sex education to ensure that it's comprehensive, age appropriate, and LGBTQ inclusive with an emphasis on consent. This is why people are pulling kids out. Like, educate my kid in math and science. Make sure they understand that, right? Check this out. A gas moratorium. You'll love this, Jim, because you know that we probably need more gas infrastructure. Pauses the approval for any new or expanded gas infrastructure through 2026. Wonderful. Next year when people are freezing, or 2025 when people are freezing, wishing they had gas, we'd be like, what are you thinking, right? There was another one. Bill 872, polluters pay, requires fossil fuel producers to fund the state's climate adaptation programs based on past emissions. A proposal that would extend the long-standing polluter pays principle for toxic waste cleanups and addressing climate change. You know what? I really wish we could hold politicians accountable like they hold everyone else accountable. I hate this two-tier justice system because when politicians make policies that really suck and we find it out later, maybe what we should do is be able to go back and make them pay.
Going back to the earlier segment of people leaving Massachusetts too, with these bills that are being passed, it's not just a preference anymore, people leaving. Like with this energy infrastructure and the things that they're doing to prevent new energy from coming into the state, they're making it so you like physically cannot live here. Like the energy situation in the state is already bad, and to ban any new infrastructure from coming in is pretty much collapsing the electric grid. So like they're making it at a point where like it has become unlivable to live here. Not just a preference of like, oh, Massachusetts is liberal, I don't like that. It's like you're literally not going to be able to turn on your heat in the wintertime if you live in the Northeast. Like that's how bad it's getting.
So here you go. Bill H2894, the Hero Bill. Sounds good, a Hero Bill. Increases the deeds excise tax on home sales to provide funding stream for the Global Warming Solutions Fund, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and the Housing Preservation and Stabilization Fund. You're a hero. You're paying more when you sell your house.
Are you even going to get any money when you sell your house? You got all these taxes that are being added on to the top that it's like by the time you sell your house, there's not going to be anything left for you.
Yeah. Hey, we got Bill H1239, Medicare for All, establishes a single payer system in which the state provides health care to all residents as a right. That's going to cost nothing. That's going to cost...
The crazy thing, too, is we've talked about this in a earlier episode where it's pretty much a few people in the House and the Senate that decide on everything that gets voted on. So we're literally like one leadership change away from all this stuff becoming law. Like all they have to do is just find a progressive person that actually wants to take a vote on all this stuff. And I mean, the state is doomed.
Well, again, we talked about Bill H1925, which is a living wage, which raises the minimum wage to $20 an hour, right? There's another one to increase the corporate tax rate, I guess, to 9.5%, and it's 8% now.
again, what happens? That's great when prices and costs are going up year over year. But again, what happens when we hit a recession? All of a sudden, businesses need to have that flexibility to not pay as much taxes. It's like the market rate for labor goes down in a recession because you have all this labor entering the workforce. So it's just like these things that you can't centrally plan these things. You need the market, the free market, to actually work in these situations, because the government can never react at the speed that the free market can.
No, so there's a lot of these. A lot of them are horrible. It's all raising taxes. All, hey, you have the rights, and just a wish list of things. Again, if we could do everything right, if we could fix problems, and we had some extra cash lying around, and we wanted to go after these things, great. We don't. There was a shortfall in revenue collection, tax collection, and they're sitting here, well, why did we make less money? Well, we're heading into recession and people are leaving. That could be it. But let's keep taxing people and not cut spending.
It's going to get worse too.
Unfortunately,
as the year goes on, it's going to get worse.
Well, Jim, I thank you for coming on. I thank everyone for watching the show. Hope everyone enjoyed. Please like and comment below. I guess that helps with the algorithm, and share with your friends. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a couple of special guests on. We're working behind the scenes to get some guests. So thanks for everything, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Yeah, take care.
Take care.
Yeah, bye.